And this is The In Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. It's good to be back with you today. We got another great show. That's right. We are broadcasting live from the Sunset Strip in the entertainment capital of the world, Hollywood. And we have a great in-studio guest, Mr. Jeff Chamberlain. How are you, Jeff?
That's good. I like the way you say that. You're like a radio guy here.
Thank you. Thank you. And I always get the question, what made you get into radio? Well, someone a long time ago told me I had a phrase for radio.
That's right.
So, of course, I had to work on the voice. And
It's there, man. It's there. It sounds great to me. Wow.
Hey, fantastic. I know you have a busy schedule. You're promoting your film. You do so much. And I just want to say, thank you for taking the time to come in and give us an interview.
Oh, that's great. Great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you bet. One of the big reasons is your film, Abandoned Mine. It's in theaters now, right? And it's also on VOD.
It is, yeah.
That's fantastic. And you just screened it last week for us, that little private screening. Thank you for the invite, by the way.
Hey, that was my pleasure. Yeah, it's out in 15 cities. And it's now breaking out also on video on demand and other platforms, iTunes, et cetera, et cetera. It's nationwide. So
Yeah,
it's a good place to be.
Yeah, fantastic. You gave a little Q&A afterwards, and I love what you had said because it was very focused, very detailed, and it was rich with great examples of filmmaking. from the writing, from the directing,
Yeah.
from your casting,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just you spoke for maybe I think about an hour or so afterwards, and
Was it that long?
it didn't seem that long.
Way too much to say. When you're married to a project like this from beginning to end, you've got a lot of stories to tell for sure.
And what I enjoyed so much was, I know a lot of people are put into the category of horror. It's a horror film, but it's really not.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
No, it really isn't.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. I think more of a thriller. I can see why they would put it in that other genre, but it's suspenseful.
It is. You look at the trailer, and the trailer, of course, is designed by the marketing guys, and it looks, when you look at the trailer, like a horror film straight up. And it's
Right.
easier from a marketing perspective to say, hey, look at this movie, look at the trailer, go see it. In reality, I've never looked at it as a horror genre picture per se. I've thought, yes, the audience and the genre of horror, broadly defined, certainly it for me it was a great platform to tell the story I wanted to tell.
Yeah.
But when you think of horror, if it's defined by Kubrick's Shining or Hitchcock or Stephen King's storytelling, which I'm not trying to compare this movie to by any means, but they are certainly iconic and representative of the kinds of thrillers, paranormal thriller, psychological horror, if you will, that really kind of turns me on, then yeah, it's in that category.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought up some of those examples because that's where I was going to head to. So I can second that motion. Yeah, because it's not the blood and gore. It is, right, it's more cerebral. It's a thinking movie, and it's geared to the younger audience.
Right.
But you have to think.
Right.
And you're always waiting for the next moment. Okay, this is building up to something. Where is it going? Not giving too much away.
Right.
But all in all, it ran, 86 minutes?
It was 95. It's
95,
It's 95 minutes.
Okay.
But you're right. For me, my intention was to really kind of break the horror mold, if you will, at least for this film, or rather than strict, adhere to the typical horror conventions, the stereotypical gimmicks that are very visual and calculated and cliche.
Right.
Which is part of the genre. I mean, that's what a genre is. It's a very well-defined format that everybody uses, tried and true. But for me, this was an interior movie, a psychological movie,
Yes.
in many ways, and the horror journey, if you will, was an interior psychological route, that I was really appealing to a younger demographic, an audience too, and that's not something that Hollywood usually does. For me, the challenge, and it's more challenging to try to tell a story without the overt gimmicks, but it was a challenge that I was willing to take, and in a sense, I thought that a younger audience still. Let's face it. I honestly don't think Hollywood gives the credit to their younger audiences that they deserve. They're smart. They're intelligent, right? And you don't have to hit them over the head with all the gratuitous stuff, and you can still get their attention and entertain them. At least that was my goal.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like everybody, they'll rise to the level of expectation. If it's for them to think, they'll need to think a little bit and engage, because you engage the audience.
Right.
Because I know the other group where I went with the private screening, it was a varied demographic.
Right.
It was all ages, and everyone's response was the same. This was great, and I remember the questions they were asking, and they were intrigued by it and listening to your answers. So I think you hit it. How do you feel about it? Do you think you hit your goal that you?
I did. Through all of our test screenings, we've had very positive results as we've tested it for different age groups, different demographics, and clearly our target demographic is young. We were going for a PG-13 rating for a reason. I wanted to introduce this terror, if you will, this movie and this story, to a younger audience that only a PG-13 would allow into the theater. I mean, so often, of course, often they'll go to R-rated movies,
right.
but this audience, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 12. How often do they have a chance to go and see a scary movie? And this was an opportunity to do that. So, having said that, yes, I'm really happy about it, and the audiences have responded, and I couldn't be more pleased. The cast was great; they delivered.
That's another question I want to ask you, because you elaborated great on how you chose the cast. But again, about the demographic, it's interesting. It's a younger demographic, and normally, like you said, they see the R-rated movie, the slashers, the killers, and all this. And this is kind of a gentle way of introducing them, I thought, more to the thriller and suspense aspect versus a horror one, where they too have to think. You guys are going to have to think about this a little bit and join the characters.
And that's exactly right. And for that reason, I took a chance as a writer on even the structure of the script itself. Typically in horror, given the inevitable outcome that all but one character is slaughtered and dismembered and impaled and you name it, and you're happy when it happens, because they're so despicable. There's an actual payoff. I mean, they're so flawed and disgusting that as an audience member, you're just thrilled when suddenly the head flies off. And so for me, the challenge, of course, was to do something very different,
right.
Which was to create characters that you actually cared about.
Yes.
Doing that actually requires a little bit of time. It requires a little bit of character development, right? So
yes.
For the first act, if you will, the first portion of the film, I took a little more time than one would normally expect, if they're expecting a horror film.
Right.
It takes place in an old abandoned mine, a haunted mine, yes, so usually you would get there just about as quickly as you could.
Right.
Get into the mine and start the fun, right? But for me, I took the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes to really develop the characters a little bit so you cared about them.
Right. And I think that was a great payoff, because you got to know not just like the main focus, it's a small group, but you got to know them enough where you cared about each one as you're going through the film, instead of just knowing the two main characters. Okay, we like them, we don't like everyone else is going to get killed.
Right,
we know,
right.
But you got to know them basically equally.
Yeah.
And you're like, what's going to happen to poor this person.
Right. And of course, they're not all wonderful characters. They're flawed. They're
human.
They're teens. They're struggling. They've got their problems, and but they had a relationship, and I was hoping to be able to develop this relationship between them because they're all small town, grew up together, and then the tragic situation that develops is more meaningful as you relate to the characters in that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was the intent.
Get curious, because I know they always say, write from your own perspective. Did you have similar relationships growing up? A couple of good friends in your teen years. You guys did everything together.
Oh yeah,
good
sure.
and bad.
Fortunately, yes. As everybody does, of course, right? You find your little clan, your tribe, and you hang together, and you go through the thick and thin, and you do the stupid things together, and you do the pranks and the tricks, and you just run around doing the stupidest things. And of course, this is all autobiographical.
It wasn't necessarily an old mine, but it was an old warehouse.
It wasn't a mine, right? But it was just as insanely stupid, some of the decisions we made as kids, right?
Did you ever go to the graveyard at night? You don't have to answer.
I'm not a grave digger, no. But no, we've done just as crazy things for sure. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Any of the characters similar to? Well, I'm sure they probably are in some way related to some of your friends. Any of them really close? It's like, man, this is my buddy Billy Bob.
Oh, that's so funny. I don't. The characters they're composites for sure of people that I've known in one way or another, but still unique to themselves. But the small town culture was something that I thought also was I found fascinating in a certain way that I think generally Hollywood and our kind of sophisticated urban societies don't find quite as fascinating as I do.
Right.
Because I think in our world we're running away from that kind of simplicity and that kind of naivete in some ways. But for me to be able to place it there in kind of a small town environment gave me an opportunity to make some social comment that was important for me, and one of the reasons I made the movie, honestly, and not having to deal with the layered complexity of authentic urban, teen culture, gave me an opportunity to explore some other things that I'm not sure all the critics fully understand at this point.
I remember you mentioning that. That's going to lead us in our next segment into another question. Jeff, again, thanks for taking the time. I'm having a blast. So much more time to talk about the movie, and without giving too much away.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
You bet. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you're listening to The In Show. And we have in-studio guest, Mr. Jeff Chamberlain, and we're talking about his great movie, Abandoned Mine. Of course, you can see that now on VOD and catch that in theaters, and we'll be having more of him in our next segment. So you hang in there. We'll be right back. And this is The In Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. It's good to be back with you today. That's right. We have a great in-studio guest, Mr. Jeff Chamberlain. And we are discussing his great film that's out right now, Abandoned Mine. So question about the title. It obviously happens in a mine. Was it fairly quick, Abandoned Mine, or did you go through a few title changes?
Oh, we did. No, we did.
Did you?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I liked the title, just simply The Mine.
Oh, okay.
And went with that for quite some time, but it wasn't quite descriptive enough. And talking to my distributors and marketeers, they thought, I think we can finesse this a little different. I'm open to that. It's not. I'm not married to the title, necessarily. But
so it started off as just The Mine.
Yeah, The Mine. Yeah.
And then it
evolved into Abandoned Mine.
Abandoned Mine.
But listen. Either way.
Yeah. it works perfect. It deals with a mine.
It's about a mine, and yes, it takes place in an abandoned mine. We shot it in real abandoned mines, and just the filming experience alone was a movie itself.
And I'm glad you brought that up. Great segue to one of my questions, because I know you've been in the industry for a while. You had talked about how you were on a daytime show, and the filming schedule was quick.
Right.
And that this movie took you 11 days.
Right.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to tell me about that, because when you were talking about it, it was like, that's amazing. And the reason it's amazing, because you pull out a quality film. The look was great, the acting was great, the directing, the whole movie looked like it should have taken longer, but the speed of it, I thought, that's fantastic. Tell me about that.
Well, typically, of course, motion pictures, studio movies, we'll shoot 2 or 3 pages a day. 2 or 3 pages a day. And that's typical. In episodic television, if you're talking about hour-long episodic television, usually you'll shoot an hour in about 7 days. Daytime television, which is where I grew up, if you will, and cut my teeth, was, we shoot an entire day in one day, one episode in one day. So that's 30 pages at least,
Yes.
or if it's an hour show, I don't know, 45 pages, all in one day. So for me, that was great training. I was used to working quickly. 3 cameras,
Yes.
in daytime television. We're moving fast. If the actors aren't prepared as well as they should be, you're not doing take 2, take 3 very often,
Right.
So I'm used to working that way and working with 2 or 3 cameras, and I've always, as I contemplated shooting this movie on a budget, hey, believe it or not, it's a function of how many days you're actually employing a crew,
Yeah, right,
So
right.
if you can somehow figure out how to shoot it in fewer days, you've just cut your budget down.
Yeah.
So as I looked at what we were up against, I had a good line producer, and we looked at our script, we broke it down, and we figured that we could probably shoot this in 11 days, and we did. And that was our challenge. And frankly, because we were shooting sometimes a mile or 2 in the belly of a mountain,
Yes.
we had to get the crew out,
Right.
to fresh air and for dinner and you name it. It wasn't easy getting in and out
Yes.
of the mine itself. So given also the fact that some of our crew was a little predisposed to claustrophobia, we had to have a quick escape. They couldn't really take more than 12 hours in
Right.
a day, and that was my promise to them. If you work fast,
We'll get
and
you
resourceful, and we find quick solutions to what we're trying to do, and we'll get out of there in 12 hours any given day, and we'll get this thing done in 11 days, because I know you're not going to be able to take more than that.
That was a great point that I had remembered. That it's not just on the surface where you're doing normal filming. You had to drag everybody down into these different mines and go up and go down for whatever it is, and still shot it in 11 days. That's amazing. Were your crew, everybody else, were they accustomed to the speed that you wanted to shoot at, or did they just kind of go with you, what you wanted, that was it?
Most of the time, no, the pace was pretty fast.
Yeah.
And I was really so pleased. I crewed it out of Utah, and the film commission was very supportive. The crew was experienced. They've done a lot of television. They've done movies. I mean, it's a real, historically known to be a real filming state, if you will. So these guys were veteran crew
that's
for the
great.
most part.
Right.
And at least my keys were. And then,
Nice.
of course, we filled in with anybody that was happy to come out and help along the way. And of course, our actors were all veteran actors and worked very well together. And if they weren't as the pros that they were, we would never have been able to stay on schedule either.
Right.
But I gotta say, it was so funny. I'll never forget. Of course, I scouted mines all over Utah and California, and finally decided, on these 3 different mines. We actually shot it in 3 totally different mines to get the locations we needed for the story. But the first day, I'll never forget it, here I was, after making this trip into these mines and looking at the locations myself and
Right.
my one spelunker friend. Here I was, and I looked in back of me the first day as I'm marching a mile into the mountain, and I couldn't believe that I had this cast and crew following behind me as they were marching into the the belly of this mountain. I just thought,
Awesome.
holy cow, what am I getting them into? Do they have any idea what's ahead?
That's amazing. That's a great story. Were some of them biting their fingernails? On the movie?
Oh, it's
We
good.
are the movie. We are the movie.
We are well, the actors were definitely using whatever they, of that experience, whatever they were to
Right.
pull it off,
That's
and
great.
they did a great job. Yeah, they were,
That's awesome.
They were experiencing a little trauma there the first day.
Any wanted to ask when you scouted the film, and I'm thinking, abandoned mines. These mines haven't been used for who knows how long. Any parts shaking? Any parts flooded? I was wondering. We got there on the first day, and the mine was flooded. So, any mishaps? Anything like that? That was from the time you scouted to the time of shooting. Was there?
Well,
anything?
there were. I did notice a few of the offshoots of the mine. There was one mine that had 45 miles of tunnels and 15, if you will, different layers or stories going down
amazing.
from the mine. And there were some of the offshoots that had caved in, but these were,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
very, we weren't filming there.
Okay.
So we were working in a very safe environment, but there's no question if somebody were to wander off, they would have found some pretty dangerous circumstances. And I think, for the most part, everybody made it out.
We don't know about the
Oh,
lonely
no,
grip
I
somewhere.
Think, yes, except for that one guy. I haven't heard from him.
Hey, Charlie,
Where's that guy?
Help!
I'm still in it.
He's the one
That's
running.
mine too. He's scouting the next mine right now.
I think it might have been a joke, but
Yeah, that's the documentary
Yes.
I'm going to cover. The one crew member that didn't quite make it out alive.
that's a great point. A little documentary. Did you take some extra footage while you were there? Just documenting the mine.
I wish I did. I wish I had just.
Yeah, well, you didn't have the time.
I didn't have the
basically.
time,
Yeah,
and we were
right.
such. I wish I did. I wish I had just kept the cameras rolling because it was the entire movie was an experience. Just filming it, it would have been a
can
great
imagine.
documentary.
Yeah,
It would
that's
have been.
great.
Next time,
Next time, mine too.
yeah, right. Mine too.
When you, what kind of mine was it? Was it like gold, silver, or was it just a mine that they were pulling different ores out?
Well, it was the one in Utah. We shot in a silver mine, an old silver mine. It was over 100 years old,
Wow.
and really fabulous location, unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the mines in California, which were in Death Valley, right, almost on the border of Nevada and California. They were old iron mines that were heavily
okay.
mined World War I, World War II.
Wow. Okay, so
For
it's
the
a little more recent.
war effort. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
more recent. Yeah.
Were they structured? I'm asking you these questions, and I'm just wondering: were they structurally different, or were they pretty much the same?
No, they were very different actually. The mine in Utah, the silver mine was wet and cold.
Okay.
In Death Valley, as you can imagine, it
Dry.
was very, very, very dry.
Yeah.
Very dry.
How was it inside? I'm sure it was cool because you're in the earth, but besides the dust, did it have the same kind of feel? Was it slightly different, or is it we're in a hole in the earth, very far deep
It's
inside
amazing.
the
What's
earth?
amazing is not only is it consistently dark, of course.
After like 20 feet or
Yeah,
something.
that's right. You go around the bend, that's it, right? But it's also the same temperature year round.
Wow.
Like 70 degrees. So in California, at least that mine, the Death Valley mine, it would be 100, 120 degrees outside.
Right.
And inside the mine, it felt like air conditioned.
It's like,
no matter where you were, 70 degrees.
That's awesome. It's like those old when a ziggurats out in the Middle East. It's hot outside. You walk in, it's like, oh, it's
Yeah,
nice.
exactly. Yeah.
And poor Charlie was sitting on top. I'm outside. Poor lonely grip.
That's right. Yeah, where's Charlie?
So everyone's experience was pretty positive. Well, being in the mine, they finally got over their
Yeah.
fear, or
They did. I mean, it was not a comfortable environment.
Okay.
Once you're working in a mine, and we were in pretty tight, cramped
I can
conditions.
imagine,
Yeah, I mean, it's dusty, dirty. It's tough. But that's what I was going for.
right.
I'm sorry the crew was subjected to that. The fact that the actors could use it for their performances kind of worked, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which was good, but it was not. It wasn't easy. And of course, some of our crew really did suffer from claustrophobia, and there were moments when we had to shut down
Breathe.
and said, "Okay, take 5," as my sound guy went screaming out of the mine.
The sound guy.
He was, you know.
Hearing the boom.
Hearing the boom. I can't. Oh, it's just, you know. Anyway. Anyway, yeah, it was. We had some fun.
That's awesome.
Fun experience.
That's awesome. Did you guys clip out that little portion of the sound and give it to him here?
Here you go. Yeah.
You're screaming out there.
Yeah, we're gonna put it on the internet. It's gonna be a YouTube clip too.
Use it as
Poor guy.
work.
He's never gonna work again in this town if it's a mine movie.
He's on no mind. No.
Which will not be.
Jeff Chamberlain. No.
No, I don't want to work for that guy again, please.
Fantastic, Jeff. Again, I got to take a quick commercial break, but having a blast. You know, and, the behind the scenes. It's fantastic. I love it. It's like you're working on a comedy, but it's a very serious movie.
Oh, the cast had a good time too. A lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, thanks again. We still got 2 segments more, so plenty of time. All right. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you're listening to The In Show. And we have in-studio guest, Mr. Jeff Chamberlain, and we still got plenty of time to talk about his career, upcoming projects, and everything else. So you hang in there. We'll be right back. And this is The In Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. Good to be back with you today. That's right, we are broadcasting live from the Sunset Strip in the entertainment capital of the world, Hollywood. And we have a fantastic guest, in-studio writer, director extraordinaire. Film right now in theaters, video on demand, iTunes, all sorts of places. Mr. Jeff Chamberlain. I'm sure I didn't cover all the places that you can get this. Am I correct?
No, it's out there. Yeah, it is. It's on demand, video on demand, iTunes, you name it. It's out there. It's great. Yeah.
So can they pretty much just type Jeff Chamberlain Abandoned Mine into the search engine, and all the links and everything will come up?
I'm sure it will. I haven't actually tried it, believe it or not. But you could, sure. It's on. You go to any one of those platforms, and right now it's right on the front page of most of them because it's just now coming out, iTunes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. You know, wanted to talk a little bit about casting because you went through a little bit of a process to cast a film, but also want to talk a little bit about the character development because it was fascinating how the arc of the character. You explained that to us that night after the screening. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but first, the cast.
Sure.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us some of the cast members' names?
Well, we have Alexa Vega from Spy Kids, and she's got the Robert Rodriguez movie Machete Kills coming out next month.
Yes.
And she's, of course, just a fabulous actor and a wonderful person. So talented. Growing up in the business, I think working since she was like 5, 6 years old, you just, I couldn't have asked for a better trooper. I hauled her in and out of that mine with the other primary 4 cast members, but she worked so well with the rest of the cast. The entire cast was really an ensemble cast.
Yes.
No one role was more prominent, really, than the others. And she was such a team player and such a darling to work with. I just loved it. And the rest of them were absolutely fabulous. Riley McClendon, what a talent he is. He was in Pearl Harbor as a young kid. He was one of the first 2 that you saw in there, and then he's all grown up and handsome and has got a fabulous career right now. Adam Hendershot is a great little actor, a wonderful character actor, and Sage Thompson, beautiful, and so I just and then Charon with a Charan, Charon Propagar is a young new talent to Hollywood that I think is just a real find. Funny and very charismatic, and when you see the movie, he is definitely the comedic relief and comedy relief in the movie.
Yes. When you were casting, were these the top of the list? Were you wanting these type of actors when you were casting?
Well, I did, and I was going for talent. Of course, as the writer, I had visual images
Yes.
generally of what they would kind of look like. But
Right.
when I got into the casting session, and especially me coming through the acting ranks, if you will, of Hollywood, that's how I started in this business. I'm particularly sensitive to the approach, if you will, and the acting talent. It needs to be authentic and real. It needs to resonate with a certain level of truth, and the relationship of how they work together is very, very important to me.
Right.
So I went with the talent and ended up with just everybody that I wanted, honestly, all the way from Alexa to this brand new guy, Sharon Propagor, who, by the way, came out of Utah.
Right, you were saying that night. I guess he had done some theater or what have you,
Right.
and then you had seen him.
I saw him.
And you cast him, yeah.
I saw him, and he was one of a few actors that I'd read in Utah. I was living in Park City at the time, still do.
Mm-hmm.
And before coming to LA, I wanted to see what the local talent pool was like, and I read him. And from that reading, I thought, okay, let's see what LA has to offer. And I saw just about every Indian, Pakistani, you name it, Middle Eastern type that would come out to read. And he was by far and away who I was looking for, and I went back and cast him.
He nailed it. That was
Yeah,
it.
he really did.
And how was the group? Did they know? Besides him, did the other four kind of know each other? Have they met in the industry at all, or did they meet and just clicked?
They just met, and they did click, and we did to get to know each other. The day before, we all went bowling in this little cow town right outside Park City, and had a good time and ate greasy hamburgers and French fries together and had some good laughs. And after that, it was an immediate click, and it looked like they'd been together for years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You guys went bowling. Nice.
Yeah, we went bowling.
The
Together.
powwow was bowling. So
Yeah.
did you end up winning? Are you a bowler?
No, I'm a terrible bowler.
I was terrible till I came up with the bumpers. Then my game just took off.
Yeah, it's called. Yeah,
It's called kitty bowling, but
That's right.
I could beat any 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So they click because in the film, it seems like they have a connection because this behind the story is that they've known each other's. They're from the same town. They grew up with each other,
Right.
and they seem to have that connection. So the bowling was a great choice.
Well, it was it. So they had to get to know each other very quickly,
Right.
and they had to appear that they had this long-term relationship, and of course throughout the movie that relationship really kind of devolves and is challenged and falls apart. So they had to in the beginning, at least look like they had been old-time friends. So when they're facing extreme circumstances and those long-term relationships are challenged, then it becomes part of the story and the character development. There's one female character that is really challenged, and her arc, not to get into the details of what happens, but she's challenged into such a way that we have, as a writer, I was attempting to psychologically justify and motivate a 180-degree turn on almost how she started out, her persona, her philosophy, everything.
Right.
And it plays an important role in how this movie turns out. So, each one of the characters had an arc that had to be, justified in some way. We had to have a beginning point. And the beginning point was, hey, small town, good kids for the most part, a little idiotic, doing dumb things like all of us did when we were teens, but facing extreme circumstances. What do people do? And in part, that's part of what this movie is about. Who are we really?
Right.
And we don't know until we really are facing troubling, trying, extreme circumstances that define who we are.
Yeah.
And for these young people who are representative of all of us in my mind as I wrote this,
Yes.
it's a study of humanity.
Right.
And the way it turns out is hopefully an optimistic perspective of who we are as human beings.
Yeah. Because you were, excuse me, saying that, a lot of that, during the Q&A. And the movie, and hearing you speak, you can see there's a depth, a thoughtfulness. You thought this through. It doesn't seem like you just thought it through for the movie, but this is a philosophy of yours.
It is. It is. And it's so funny because some people get it and some people don't. And it's so interesting because the reviews now that have come in this last week, there's this ideological, almost cultural divide between the intended audience that I'm so pleased get it and appreciate it, and then there's the other audience that I really didn't make the movie for, that just don't, they can't spend the time to even think about it, and they don't get it. Is the bottom line, but. The point is that there really is a cultural divide between the two worlds that are responding to the movie. Right. So it's from my perspective, it's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, it is. It is. Do you ever run into any of these? I'm sure you probably have. Run into critics, and you ever ask them, did you not get it?
No,
did you not see it?
No, honestly, I don't run into critics. And maybe it's for the reason that they don't want to have. They're running the other direction. But from the beginning, I actually intended to do something that I knew typical Hollywood horror fans would most likely. I didn't want to offend them, but I knew that they wouldn't embrace, because I'm really defying every convention normally used in typical horror films. The typical, stereotypical, cliche-ridden, conventions of every 5 minutes having something really quite grotesque, challenging your senses to the very core is not what this is about. It's a very interior movie, and yes, it actually is about something. And so, in a sense, I looked at the horror genre as an opportunity to not have to go into a detailed, character-driven, nuanced characterization, driven piece, and use, typical, stereotypical conventions, if you will, to define the characters the way I wanted to, but be able to focus on some other things, which is, what is the story actually about? And for me, although it's not apparent, there's an allegorical story and narrative being told throughout, and I've come to understand that it is embedded deeply enough that most people don't get it, but that's okay. That's the reason I made the movie, and it was fun and gratifying to be able to tell the story I wanted to tell.
I think that was perfect insight. And if all else fails, they should read up on the Greek tragedies, and then we hit it. Jeff, again, I got to take a quick break, and that was fantastic. It's great explanation. I think we're saying so much without revealing anything.
There you go. Yeah. There are a few spoilers, unlike some critics who found it necessary to divulge, which I don't quite understand. But
yes, they're the ones that don't get it.
That's right.
Jeff, again, appreciate it. Hey, all right. Well, this is Gus Summers, and you are listening to The In Show, and we have in-studio guest Mr. Jeff Chamberlain, and we still got one more segment with him. So you hang in there. We'll be right back. And this is The In Show. And I'm your host, Gus Summers. And we got another great show for you. We have a wonderful in-studio guest, director, writer, actor, all sorts of things. You've done so much in your career. We've only covered the movie, which is why you were here, but your career has been so lengthy. And I should say his name, Mr. Jeff Chamberlain. That's right. He's worked with some of the great stars of Hollywood. Right off, am I correct? You were telling me about your first movie. Come on, you'd work with legends.
Oh, that was my first introduction. I was in college.
Amazing.
And I got a call from a guy who happened to be a casting director, believe it or not, at Central Casting. And they had their offices at Universal at the time.
Right.
And he says, hey, I'm doing a little war movie and we need some extras. And I was working construction at the time in the heat of the summer, which at the time was something, it wasn't bad, getting a nice tan. And,
yeah, sure.
And he says, yeah, we need some extras, and come on down. And I go, what's this all about? I hadn't even thought about the movie business, honestly. He says, yeah, we're doing this war movie. It's called Midway. I go, okay, who's in it? He says, oh yeah, it's an all-star cast. Come on down. So anyway, I went down, and he said, okay, you got to cut your hair real short like a Marine. I go, are you kidding me? This is like mid-'70s at the time, and of course, nobody got a date in the mid-'70s if you had short hair looking like a Marine.
That's right.
So I said, no, I'm passing. Anyway, the bottom line is I had some friends that were with me, and they said, yeah, it'd be so cool. Let's go be in a movie. And I said, okay, I'll just go along for the ride. So anyway, I show up on the set. It's Midway, all-star cast.
Yes.
Charlton Heston, Henry Fonda, Glenn Ford, Robert Mitchum, Hal Holbrook, on and on and on. And there I was on the set with these guys. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. Of course, these are names that my younger cast members never heard of for the most part anymore,
Right.
Who are these guys?
Yeah, who are these?
But there I was. I was looking at Moses. I was looking at Ben-Hur.
Yeah. Grapes of Wrath and everything.
Yeah. Are you kidding? Oh, I thought I died and gone to heaven. And that's how I started out,
Yeah, that's fantastic. I had to sneak that one in there. Was that I just finished reading a Robert Mitchum biography not too long ago.
Yeah.
He just talked about his life. He was on the chain gang. He was all kinds of stuff. I go, what a great trooper, man. Fantastic actor. Yeah, but we only got a few more minutes. I just want to give a chance again. The film is on iTunes. You can get it on video on demand. It's going to be out in theaters now, and it's basically you just type it in any search engine and find it.
You can find it. You go onto any one of those platforms. It's on cable. It's on demand, and you can download it. You can watch it tonight. You can watch it this weekend. I would suggest watching it with some friends. Go pop some popcorn. Actually, one of the reviewers was saying, hey, it's too bad that it's not going to be wide in theaters. It's in select theaters. It's in 15 cities. But for the most part, people are going to see it, on demand, iTunes, whatever, digitally. Right. And they said, that's too bad because this is really a theater movie. See it in a dark theater with the popcorn, with your friends. And that's the way I intended it to be seen. But, we live in a world where it's tough to get it wide, especially this is a little unpretentious little movie. It was kind of like, I felt like as the filmmaker, the little engine that could, trying to climb that mountain. It was like a David and Goliath story, trying to do something different that Hollywood said, it just can't be done. You cannot reach a young audience unless you go formula, unless you deliver what they're used to getting and what we deliver them. I said, you know what, I just have more respect and I give them a little more credit than I think Hollywood does. And that was my intent. And I'm so happy that the audiences are responding the way that I was hoping they would, honestly.
The look of it, the feel of it, the acting, everything about it is a big screen movie. I mean, you hit it right on the head. It's one of those movies. It's not like it's a old '60s movie. It's like no, it's a modern movie, a thought-provoking movie with a wonderful look to it. It's like, I'm glad I saw it on this big screen.
On a big screen. Yeah. And what's interesting is the look. Yes, from the very beginning, I wanted a very realistic, a very gritty, very textured look of the movie. And I think if we had a bigger budget, we might have been tempted to go build a set, But for me, how many cave movies and interior Earth movies have there been? Studios where it's a set, it looks like a set, it's lit like a set, and I'm going, holy cow, this is supposed to be, dark, and it looks like a movie set. And for sure, I didn't want that. I wanted a really tough, gritty environment, and we were forced to do that.
To endure it.
And we were 2 miles inside a mountain at times, and these.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What's amazing is right. You say that You always hear, do you need something tough? You need something rugged? We got a mine right over here. You don't have to build anything. You want a tough guy? There's a guy over here. You don't have to make it up.
Yeah, just go for the reality, right?
Yeah.
Be resourceful. I mean, and that's kind of what we did inside. We had a great crew. I had Brian Sullivan, who is a great cinematographer and very resourceful. Worked at Sundance a lot in their institute and their program up there with some great people, because he's a Utah guy. And
Right.
and part of the solution was, looking for, what's around us rather than trying to recreate.
Yeah.
Go with the elements that we're working with, and it'll resonate as being more truthful that way.
Right. You brought up that question about a big budget. You budgeted for, what you got, and what you got was extraordinary, and just the look of it and everything. If you had a larger budget, what would you have done different? Have you thought about it?
Oh, yeah,
I would have done
absolutely.
this, and then
I still would have shot in the mines
Okay.
with this cast, but what I would have done is extended 11 days to 22 days, maybe. And
okay.
just shot fewer pages a day. And
okay.
what that would have done is it just would have given me more options,
Okay.
and more to work with. I mean, part of the challenge really was, hey, what can we do with a limited budget, limited days, and when we're really forced to find solutions on a daily basis to get through the day and do the best we can. In part, it was to prove something on that front as well. So, yes, if we had more days, it would have been a slightly different movie. Yeah,
Wow.
no question about it.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. Yeah, now it's really curious because, like I said, it's perfect. In my opinion, I think it's great. So now we're gonna have you raise 22 enough funds for 22 days and remake the film.
Well, let's put it this way: Abandon Mine 2. Okay, we'll have 22 days. If I have anything to say about it, right? We'll still only be able to shoot 12 hours in a day.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's all the cast and crew can take, and I learned that.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
But we'll just have more days.
That's right.
And
That's right.
We'll have some more luxury, out there.
Well, they always talk about packaging. Was this a one and it's done, or do you got two or three? Abandon Mine 2, Abandon Mine 3,
yeah.
kind of working.
I've been asked to actually put together some scenarios and some treatments for 2, 3, and 4, and we do. We've got some
Nice.
great stories. If in fact it makes sense to come up with another. However, I've never known anybody to make a sequel if the first one wasn't slightly successful. So the challenge here is, of course, since this is really it's not a studio distributed film, it really is up to the public to embrace it, tell their friends about it, go to iTunes, go to On Demand, click on it, and when people say, hey, you know what? The audience is responding to it, then, and hopefully if it takes, it's a great Halloween movie, by the way. It is a Halloween theme. So about the time Halloween comes out, it will also be on DVD coming out about that same time. Between now and then, it'll be on all the platforms. Subscription will be following in about 60 days. So distribution's rolling out. It's going to be here through the fall. It's a fall movie. We're just getting an early start on it. And so I'm hoping friends will tell their friends.
Absolutely.
And of course, to go see it.
Yeah.
Some people are saying that critics are saying some very nice things about it. They're saying that it's a perfect date movie. And it's also a family kind of horror film. Some people are saying, hey, you know what? The whole family will enjoy this film. It's horror fans, of course, love it. But it's some people are calling it a perfect family horror movie. It's saying it's genuinely, scary, and it's the kind of thing parents can watch with their teens.
Yes.
It's not an 8-year-old movie. It's not a 12-year-old. I mean, it really is a PG-13 movie for a reason. There's some really intense images in it purposely.
Right. But perfectly executed.
Oh, you're being so kind. Yeah.
Well, they're called critics for a reason. They're not, what do you call it, agreex, I guess. But I enjoyed it. I'm a movie guy, and, I thought it was great. And Jeff, all the wonderful success to you. I know it's going to be a great hit. I know people are going to love it when they see it.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I'm just so happy to be at this point here and people out watching it. I appreciate you having me on the show. What fun this is.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm glad you took the time. Hey, thanks again. Appreciate it. Hey, well, this is Gus Summers, and you've been listening to The In Show. And we had in-the-studio guest, Mr. Jeff Chamberlain, writer, director extraordinaire. Yes, has worked with some of the great legends in Hollywood. And be sure to visit all those media platforms that look for Abandoned Mind. You can see it right now, so be sure to go and do that and spread the word. Of course, visit us at theinshow.com where you can find this link and everything else that we've been doing. Of course, visit us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all those great social media sites. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, Gus has left the building.